I like taking my time, but between Minecraft mod packs, indie games, and my other, smaller autistic niches, I began to really take some time to really rediscover what made me glued to my computer, socially incapable of doing anything normal outside. Now, a quick thing to understand about people like me, who are notably less typical with my neurons, is that it takes me time very similar to how you now experience my post-employment time between videos. Which is long, very deliberately just me avoiding my problems. In that time, I built some shit in Minecraft, I built some shit in Pell World, I touched some grass, knocked up a girl, knocked down a girl, knocked up a guy, and played even more games to completion. And during this time, I realized something. I have a rather strong fascination towards rats, and what better rat to analyze than the government? Canada has a particularly stinky part to which America would be translated to the States, and for the rest of civilized society, we call provinces. Unless you're Australian, in which case you deserve your king codes. In the dark corner of Canada, known only as Alberta, they have committed the ultimate sin against my kind. One so foul that all rat kind has banded together to resist the incoming tide of the fascist regime. They banned rats. They ban a lot of other people too, functionally, but like, I'm a rat, so I guess I'm a fugitive. Let me ask you, what are your views on the gay, the lesbian, potentially even the transgender? If you're any of these, it's increasingly difficult to find slightly decent places to live in a modern society, just like a rat. And if you think the states are bad, you're right, Alberta's also going that exact same direction. To understand how we ended up in this mess, I'd have to bring you back to a much more volatile and an uncertain time, as opposed to the very certain and unfortunate time of today. The year is 2020. The political landscape is consumed by yaoi fanfics, and people, for the first time in a while, have learned to chill for a bit. It was a time of alarm and panic, for which many was a very serious period in our lives. For me, it was a bit of a furry awakening. Not for a lack of acceptance. At this point in my life, I was thoroughly engrossed in the Gardevoir Gooning arc, and located other characters to spread my fixation on. But it was also the first year that Gunfire Reborn was released. I played a bit of the 1.0, did a bit of shooting a gun, and then just didn't touch it for the rest of my young adult life. Now, as an old man who is freshly off retirement at my job of unemployed, at the age of 25 where most esports players get to enjoy living a normal life, what has changed since then? I played Atlas, had another furry awakening. The political landscape is also now somehow consumed by yaoi fanfics, and people for the first time in a while have learned to be kinda chill about it. It is also, somehow, a time of alarm and panic, and yet again is a very serious point in our lives. So, while pondering thy orb, I had a thought. Several thoughts surrounding me, sucking the soul out of me at breakneck pace while a white tear drips down my leg. Obviously, I had some revelations, such as me realizing that at this pace, if I were to continue to internalize all my awakenings, I would get a comp sci degree and buy several fursuits. Other thoughts were as to why the government loves to screw around with people, and why governments seem more functional in games than in real life. There's some things going on right now that would be considered fiction quibs 10 years ago, and the government has been using the same playbook for ages. So I wondered, in my immense autism, how do they compare to other governments and games? After the last 3 videos, you should be keenly aware that I like going over law for no reason, so FTL. Yeah, I just wanted to talk shit about the Zoltan. They make a great unit because I like my shields, but like, be so for real with me, how many lines of dialogue did you get through before you peel your own eyes out? This is specifically on the multiverse, which, as far as my ass is concerned, is the equivalent of Calamity for Terraria, or Stardew Valley Expanded for, slavery. Basically, it's a vanilla-friendly overhaul of the game that handholds you if you have never played the game before. And if you have, it's a very healthy experience. We're gonna do that thing where you get to hear me yap about how dogshit the NG ship is, and in return I try to get a structured video out. I spent 300 hours on this game to like really try to understand how the individual factions work, and how close they are to the American government. Well, look, they just keep doing the same shit. There's no fiction book on Earth that comes close to this level of fuckery. Like, how are we actually in the Call of Duty Ghost timeline? Like, when do the nukes hit? Like, where's the Nova 6? Anyways, I need to make this thing exceedingly clear. You are the only non-racist person in a sea of racist crewmates, and becoming racist is the entire journey of the game. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, some races are just more tolerable than others. Me personally, I'm putting my vote behind the Free Mantis and the Orchids, but the Federation doesn't discriminate, it only demands. And currently, it demands that I escort my questionably legal hard workers to the headquarters of this World Federation, and kill the subject of permanent Groundhog Day syndrome. Of the races, they can be separated into the following categories: tolerable, less tolerable, or intolerant. You may consider this your awakening to which kind of cheese will lead to the best overall outcome for your journey. Always look ahead to other sectors to see which crew members you will need to be best suited for the encounters ahead. For example, you're going to a sector of free mantis. They are very simple-minded creatures and have a very simple premise. If you do not have a free mantis in your crew, you're gonna have a rough time with these bugs. They aren't exactly the smartest. If you do have a free mantis in your crew, however, this is probably the easiest sector to get through in the entire game, and your new bug friends will literally be swarming to either join you or give you free shit. This type of system goes for every other race, by the way. Just make sure that their ideology matches the sector you're going into, their skin is the same as the average denizen, and you should be good to go. There are some exceptions to this, however. For example, the Rockman theocracy is full of regressive Luddites that hate the concept of personal health and safety. Hiring a fellow Rockman means very little, because of the faction that you're part of is not the Rockman theocracy. Your ship will be jumped repeatedly, and by pretty much everyone. Sometimes you'll just have to forget the concept of killing the crew to take the whole ship to scrap because they just won't die. Anyways, the crux of the video. Do you think that I will rate the races based on a tier list? No. I do not think I'm qualified to rate races. I'm using a fail pass system to determine if I would do any of the following. A. Live in their sector. B. Fuck their people, ethically or not. And C. Commit genocide. I think this system is more genuine for the type of assessment I am making. Let's say we are running a border checkpoint and my job is to decide who gets to go in the country and who gets to face the wall. There is no tier list here. They either will be welcomed in as one of our own, or they will be welcomed in to my stomach. As such, I will be taking the races and separating them into their faction categories, for some of the separations are so distant from their fellows in their species that it can be a completely different tree of the animal kingdom. This is the equivalent of taking a tire, forcing it to birth a tree, and then saying that it's a fungus, except that's exactly how it works. We will be going in order from what I want to talk about most to what I want to talk about least. As a monster fucker myself, I really didn't want to start with the most orc-like populous faction, which would be the 12 human factions that are in the game. Rather, I wanted to find out more about what the other races had to offer in terms of organized government, and I think I found the one that spurred on the idea subconsciously in the back of my head. The slugs can be separated into different aspects of America, that being money, resources, and showing off how much better their culture is compared to other cultures. This is going to come as a shock to absolutely no one, but I wouldn't put anything near the slugs. I'm so sorry, but these are not fuckable at all. Though they will fail the B criteria as a whole. The kleptocracy are the most money-hungry of the slugs, but rather than rob you blind, they will seek to establish diplomatic ties, shake your money appendages, sit you down at the trading station, negotiate, and then they will rob you blind. Since it generally doesn't pay to have a slug of any kind on your ship while dealing with the kleptocracy, they are able to be reasoned with, and are unlikely to leave a client without a ship to live on, meaning that you could, as many have, eke out a life amongst the slugs. As many of you have summarized, though, these penny-pitching, money-hungry bastards will absolutely steal all your gear if given the opportunity, and will leave you in a state where you're almost starving half the time, if not kill you outright. Depending on the slug that you are dealing with, you will either come out of the transaction wealthy as all hell, or they will come out of the transaction wealthy as all hell, and leave you to rot on your empty core, left with barely enough to limp to the next beacon station. However, they also have an ethics system, which indicates that generally they are not huge on war crimes, and they are also friendly enough to not shoot you outright, which is certainly an upgrade to some of the other factions we'll be talking about later. Generally speaking, the use of surrender tactics, wherein you feign surrender as an enemy combatant, and later attack someone who accepted your full surrender, is what we would like to call in dysfunction as a war crime. And this is the only one that they generally resort to. Right, so I just looked it up. That war crime is called perfidy. I actually forgot about its name, but yeah, it's called perfidy. This leads you up to the repercussions of having the same done to you, as well as your fellow troop. For an opposing military can no longer reasonably deduce that you or your fellow slug are surrendering with or without false intention. As the slugs employ this tactic, I would consider this genocide as fair game, because of a secondary clause where, due to a lack of uniform, it is generally difficult, if not impossible, to distinguish slug civilian from slug military. The reasonable response from an armed force when faced with an enemy who makes no distinction between their civilians and armed force, while also using false surrender tactics to try and gain the upper hand in any engagement, would be to kill any member of that race for the reasons of self-preservation. Knowing that I can reasonably justify the genocide of the slug race, would I decide to? Probably, but not for the currently stated reasons. Despite the fact that they are conniving and sly, actively plotting to take over literally everything with their slimy grippers, they are also quite reasonable and can often, with enough force, be persuaded to see your side of the coin. The type that usually ends with someone getting their back stabbed, but that's how it goes in space sometimes. Unlike them, I have the ability to detonate a nuclear bomb that would make the AI bubble look like a slight malfunction. To explain why I would genocide the slugs, I would need to explain another faction, which are basically the slugs' more questionable members. As the KGB is to Russia, as ICE is to America, the Exotic Hunters Guild is to the slugs. They're literally called the Klansmen, I can't make this up. They're literally the Clink Clank clan of the... Now, I'm sure you're aware, but genocide is a decision that should weigh very heavy upon one's head. The eradication of an entire race is a huge commitment, as well as a very morally dubious action to undertake. However, these fucking chuds have gained enough of my ire to the point where I actually go out of my way to trap them in their own oxygen or life support rooms and drain them of oxygen myself. I will sit there, on my phone, and play Blotcho while watching them die from asphyxiation. So, using our system, I would not live anywhere near their sector because I value my body. I would not sex, and I would genocide them without question. Without spoiling anything, because, yeah, go play the mod, go read the lore. I know, reading is hard for you fucking zoomers, but trust me, reading is good for your brain. We barely have the evolutionary changes that make it tolerable for our frontal cortex, and we're suddenly shoving TikTok and YouTube shorts down its throat like Maury Calliope and the horse. Just read it, the lore is good. If you really need to, put something on in the background, even though most of the melodic tracks are good. They bang. My personal favorite 3 while playing FTL are T-Girl, Pokemon Tear Slop, and the War Thunder Furries, but do what you need to in order to read more than like 3 paragraphs. Like, if you really want an explanation as to why I would kill them on sight, it's because they would do the same to me in a heartbeat. It's the respectful thing to do. Alright, so we just went over a government that I would like to overthrow, so what would be the closest thing to a greedy, overreaching organization that will use any means necessary to obtain maximal profit? Welcome to Hector Corporation Limited.tm, where your crap is our scrap, and the satisfaction is guaranteed, because you can't buy your stuff back. A major distinction of this race is that their lineup includes employees, which are just super money-hungry slugs that, despite their background, don't actually try to stab you in the back, as well as leeches, and most importantly, what, lizard tree things? This is the main distinction, because they're an entirely different corporation that has separate ideals for the kleptocracy, as well as a few races under their belt. They might be disgusting, but scrap is still valuable, so I'll hold off bombing them while I go through the rest of their remains. Let me make one thing clear, I don't hate these slugs nearly as much as the kleptocracy. I hate them more. I've already made the Israel comparison with the slugs before, but now I get to make the comparison of Microsoft with the corporation. They will literally ask for 7,000 scrap up front, let's not joke around here. I would not live with them, I would not sex them. They're literally leeches, let's nuke them from orbit, and for the tree people, well, this is the only place they show up, and they're just sweatshop workers. We'll come back to the leeches, but let's give the lizards some of the spotlight. They're oppressed, used for labor, not much else, and most importantly, they're completely out of their league. I wouldn't nuke them just because it's a waste of resources to nuke this small village of people. I need to save my resources for something more disgusting. As robot people, the NG are a bit far out from humanity. This doesn't mean I wouldn't crack them, but my criteria changes for what I would fuck. You see, normally for what I would or would not commit to sex with, I would fall back on a complete analysis of the potential for emotional attachment, the level of kink, as well as the other sex-adjacent factors known as foreplay and aftercare. I need to have an emotional attachment, not to say that I'm a demisexual, but it is to say that I wouldn't fuck someone on the first date. I've fucked friends, and I've had it with solid 10s as well as solid 4s, so I come from a place of integrity when I say that looks don't matter to me for sex. They most certainly do in terms of relationship, but that's because there's a holy trinity of a type that I just have. But this in no way stops me from breaking the back of a weird girl or shorty. Here, I would have to change my emotional attachment criteria entirely. I am perfectly alright with the concept of having an emotional attachment to an android, but personally, I can't do it myself. So for these NG, I will have to consider them more as a toy to use rather than a lifelong companion. Not because they're a robot, but because their dialogue and mannerisms suggest that they experience love and attachment in a way that is far detached from humanity's understanding, and sometimes there's no bridging that barrier. The level of kink doesn't really change on a fundamental level, but I'll be less harsh because there's less effort for changing things. You see, with a person, it is significantly more difficult to put them in binds, leash them, or collar them. But forcing a robot to choke on it won't work at all, and anything I want, I can do by installing Linux, pulling a couple of wires out, and bolting a flashlight to an easily accessible spot. It just takes the fun out of it. With these two in mind, I hope you understand when I say I wouldn't really want to have sex with the NG. So would I rip apart every last wire, scrap them all, and commit what we in the function would consider a democratic act of war? No, these robots absolutely do not deserve genocide. The NG are very friendly to the faction that the Renegades represent, and are pretty amicable to humanity as a whole. For the Harmony, which are the first of the two NG factions, they will pretty much always give help if you ask for it, and anytime you help them in turn, whether through distress calls or for saving them from slavers, they always try to repay the favor. The NG are pretty hard to argue genocide for. They've already been hunted down for sport by the Mantis, or their worst natural enemy, but unlike the Separatists, they're incredibly racist in a useful way. Their generally good-natured intentions towards humans, great treatment of them, as well as their altruistic actions, lends me to believe that living amongst the hegemony would be a good decision. Given this, I don't think I could lead a genocide against them either. The Separatists are very similar, no sex, generally friendly to humans. They're pretty pissed at your faction due to the lack of action in keeping the Separatists safe from the hegemony. But they also understand that it would be a generational political fumble, so they try not to care about it, which I appreciate. Also, given that they're a prosecuted entity within a prosecuted entity, it's pretty hard to argue that genocide wouldn't be seen as a terrible thing to do. I wouldn't anyways though. Separatist NG are one of my favorite units to use. Oh, the Zoltan. I love them on my ship, I really do. The ability to keep your shields permanently on is inarguably one of the best qualities a unit in this game can have, but there's a level of spineless behavior that I simply cannot stand behind, and the Zoltan far surpassed that level. They took a look at their friends when they said they would stand by them, and when the time came, where were they? Running away. The rebels were at their door and they were running away. These guys are the kings of running away from fights. But wait, there's more. They're also the kings of picking completely unfair fights. Catch their asses harassing caravans of civilians, going into undefended territories to hunt down politically motivated targets, and milking foreign bodies for all the scrap they are worth. I don't even need to question it, their entire mantra of peace is just fraudulent. Their ships are some of the most difficult to kill, their crew literally explode upon death, and their encounters on average don't even have an option to avoid fighting. All of this and they still have the audacity to fucking encourage peace from other races. This is passable for their monks who are, well, they're monks. The monks have a very large emphasis on not fighting, and mostly give you the option of passing by without issue. Despite this, the ministry as a whole are only pacifist when it benefits them, and are comparable to raiders. I would never live in a government that doesn't hold to its promises, that doesn't stand by their word, and most importantly, they roll over and play nice to anyone who they can't beat. Not to mention how insanely bureaucratic they are. Pretty much every other race in the galaxy agrees. Never has talked to a Zoltan. They're the biggest sticker for laws in the entire universe. And will hold you up for eternity, reciting each passage of each bill that gives them jurisdiction over your ship for some godforsaken reason. Now as for the, more intimate kind of interspecies interaction, the Zoltan are remarkably easy to dominate in combat, and quite frankly, would quickly run out of steam during the act of sex, assuming they even have sex. However, this would also imply that they have to get creative and use other methods in order to please their partners. Enter their energetic capabilities. Electric shocks, heat play, whatever fucked up ACME cum laser play that you can come up with, the Zoltan probably got it. Would easily crack one of the more corrupt members of the Zoltan race, and would also fuck one of the peer ones. That being said, I would not genocide them. And the most racist, bullshit, and evil thing I will say so far, they aren't all bad, you just have to find the good ones. And I understand that this is a soulless thing to say. But you try living on a fuck-ass ship with a very multicultural crew and wonder why all of them have the exact same opinion. A broad brush doesn't always do the best job, but it's there for a reason. That being said, their ships are always a huge pain in the ass to take down. You break their super shields, and deal with the consequences later. It's worth noting that they have this advantage over other ships, and that means that any attempt to max execute the Zoltan would also be met with a large amount of complications. Because as previously stated, they are not a peaceful race, and as much as I would like to re-educate a lot of their brains, it's simply too impractical. Well, I'm pretty sure the last section made some people uncomfortable. Well, prepare to get even less comfortable. This is the part that justifies why everyone fucking hates the Zoltan. Dustbringer said, why do we even pretend like we're peaceful? Let the pillaging begin. Let me put this in more simple terms. They board you, they teleport around, and then they suicide bomb you. To supplement this strategy, their ships are mostly outfitted with clone bay modules, which lends a mind's eye into their psychology. The game, as well as most competing factions, calls them terrorists, and you would think that's exaggerated in some way or framed in a way to make them look bad, given that FTL has a bit of a theme of space racism not always being a good idea. Nope, these guys are as bad as you think they are. There's a lot of inspiration from Al-Qaeda, Just think of any mercenary group or terrorist group secretly funded by the government, and that's these guys. The more corrupt members of the Zoltan Ministry directly support these guys, and they used to operate entirely within the space of the Ministry sectors. Now, did they get kicked out? No. Despite being labeled as literal terrorists, they are still operating wholly within the bounds of the Ministry, as well as expanding to take their own sectors. The Duskbringers are actually sympathetic on occasion, and it's easy to see why. Their reason for hating your faction is actually pretty solid, all things considered, and they have a lot more spine. They also let go of all the bureaucracy, so at least when you die, you won't need to hear about the laws that let them harvest your organs, and remold your phallus into a statue to honor their fallen martyrs. However, they are still the enemy, and as such are very predictably xenophobic. As they are not human, that means, yeah, you're not allowed to live there. I would still bang a Goth Zoltan baddie, and would not consider genocide to be particularly effective or a worthwhile tactic. Actually, while we're on the topic, I should get a bit deeper into why or why not for genocide. Yes, morally genocide is objectively bad, but sometimes, especially with some of the more fanatical members in space whose entire ethos, like the Zoltan Duskbringers, can be summarized into, we will kill you until you kill all of us, you don't really get a choice in the matter. There's also the ethical dilemma of a genocide. The Zoltans are not all monsters, and this goes for the Duskbringers too. Many of them are disillusioned with either their government or another government, and oftentimes the Zoltan Duskbringers are simply taking the actions that the rules and regulations do not allow them to. While yes, the majority of them are terrorists, this also does come from a race that is so painfully bureaucratic that most of their own citizens cannot tolerate them. It would be an ethical disaster to murder all the Duskbringers simply for having a title, and with no distinction as to whether or not their actions support your current goal. Sometimes it does, too. Most of the time, though, as a side note, they are still rebel sympathizers, and you're gonna want to kill as many of them as possible to stay on the people's good side. Sometimes genocide is the correct answer, and when it is, there's a major factor in determining if the action of genocide should be undertaken. And would you know it, that major factor is practicality. Like financially, it's better to let the Zoltans live. From a manpower perspective, they're going to put up so much of a fight that you would be escalating into a nuclear war, if not worse. They're ethically sound, able to be reasoned with. They have the backing of multiple governments, and are an effective organization. There's a lot here, you know. So you know Pokemon, right? Stay with me on this. You can use concepts to tell what's super effective on other things, right? So if we just talked about an electric type, what would counter that? Well, electric type moves are not very effective into grass type, so the Orchids. We got two different factions, both of which I will be judging entirely differently. The Gathering is the one I'm gonna tackle because they're much simpler and consistent with their ideology. They can be described as the Soviets if they actually worked as ideally as possible. Let me draw some comparisons. The problems of communism are that decisions are not made very quickly, a group bickers without coming to a consensus, and that antagonizing figures can cause a lot of internal strife. Now these are plans. Their decisions are made collectively, and one of the main missions you make is demonstrating how quickly they can resolve internal issues with a simple debate. Their internal strife is also quite easily resolved, as you hardly have to do any of the fighting in the main questline, usually being able to wordcraft your way around political issues. Honestly, quite impressive. I can see myself living around the Orchid and the Gathering with little to no adjustment to how I live. No sex though. If my phallus has paper cuts on it, it will lower the real estate value of having someone sit on it. And no genocide either. I like plants, here's some proof. It would be incredibly easy to just deprive them of air, or light their ships on fire, but I also have to decline the genocide offer, because they're super friendly, super chill, and incredibly altruistic. Accepting of other races, and most importantly, their weapons are complete and utter bullshit. I'm not kidding, you can end a game just by using a base Arctic cruiser. I've literally done it before. Alright, let me describe this to you before you imagine what kind of race this is. They literally call themselves the Confederacy. They're incredibly nationalistic, imperialistic, and industrialist. They run massive trade hubs and are the core of mercantile work across the galaxy. A good number of military-grade ships run their tech to some degree. Indeed, I am talking about the Orchids, but explicitly the kind that never grew up past their roots. see what they did there? Roots? As opposed to the very friendly Orchids, the Vampweed are much less amicable to humanity. They have a very complex political system, and much like the Americans, have multiple factions trying to wrestle control who are not a part of their system. They maintain power by using their massive pockets, well-maintained trade routes, and being very friendly to many different races who you can find at their local bars. They also have some of the strongest, most bullshit, and incredibly balanced weapons in the game, as well as solid crew to match. The average Vampweed sector actually actively has many different kinds of people, friendly or not, and in general they have a pretty good grip on power. They do ask for a flat rate upon entering their sector, but I do have to consider the following. They have to deal with all the other races wanting to forcibly take over their incredibly profitable resources and factories. They do a very good job in maintaining not just law and order, but also social services like healthcare. Their political system is under attack by pretty much everyone, who are using incredibly aggressive pressure tactics to make sure their sector is more friendly to them. They sponsor and encourage scientific endeavors, and even have a deal with the Shell that lets them pay less considering their less fortunate position. And many in the Confederate will be friendlier to a crew of such a ship. I think the flat rate is pretty understandable, and I would indeed want to join these plans considering they have a functional government that respects public health and safety. This doesn't mean that they are an altruistic race, they're simply looking out for their own. Unlike the Orchids, who are much more consistent across the board and are a lot easier to live around, the Vampweed have some serious political issues, and their relations with other races are always strained in a way that makes peace impossible. For example, the local Vampweed Orchid is empowered, something like a minister or some shit. They receive a call from the Coalition, who calls everyone else cringe and encourages you to join their coalition. You receive a credible threat from the Rebels, who encourage you to try and move your entire race to the corner of the galaxy so that they get exterminated last. You receive a call from the Rockmen asking for weapons. You receive a call from the Slugs, who offer to buy your crap. You then look out the window and notice several incredibly well-armed battleships from the Coalition, who try and persuade you to join the Coalition. The Vampweed, however, they're a special group of fuckers. Like, they're the kind of plant that decide upon violence. Are they still mostly the same as the Orchids? Yes, down to their botanical structure. But they do pretty wicked things to people they don't like, and unlike the Orchids, they don't really care about being tried in the Nuremberg trials. Their weapons are mostly the same, except they're pretty good at raiding, aiding a boarding crew, or asphyxiating enemy crew. Think of them as the kinkier plants. I really got nothing else. They're basically the same. Still wouldn't fuck them, but they get a D+ for the choking kink. As they do endorse war crimes, however, they get more of a pass from me, so they're about equal to a normal Orchid in my eyes. You never know when you need a couple of walking war crimes in a ship on your side, just don't start a race war with them, because you aren't winning. Alright, for this thought experiment, I need you to put yourself in the shoes of an engineer for a second. Let's say you're a human. Your name is John Fixer, and you're probably one of the best engineers this side of the galactic front. You get some pretty good benefits from this job. You have plans to build up a career, form a sizable savings account of some kind. Maybe you start your own business at some point and have a stable life, settle down somewhere. In the middle of your musing about the bright future ahead of you, your boss, the shipmaster, strolls up to you with a drink in one hand and some papers in the other, presumably some more rancid bullshit. Sure enough, your boss stares deep into your eyes with the kind of exhaustion that would drain a room of color, and walks up to you, trying to put on a front of decorum. So, you have a new intern, needed someone to help out with the ship's hull like you asked. I know that the borders were a concern, so we found someone who has a history of hand-to-hand combat. You know a way around a gun, should complement nicely in case you do get boarded. This person has worked on another ship, the HMS Edinburgh, and helped keep her afloat as a combat engineer. I know that this ship is pretty infamous for scuttling, but it had quite the history behind it, of successful combat and transport deployments. This individual was there for most of that. The history of the ship was 3 years with several combat deployments. Upon hearing this, you'll lighten up a bit. Extra hands are always nice around a ship, with endless menial tasks like loose wires with dented holes. The ship will finally be in good shape for once. Your boss hands you the resume and, sure enough, combat ready, familiar with engineering tasks, you go meet your new worker. You are greeted with a 12-foot tall giant mantis with barely any sort of appendage save for their guillotine claws, the heaviest British accent you've ever heard in your life, and a yard-long stare. Now, mantis doesn't exactly have what you would like to call appendages. They're not exactly the best handymen, and ship repairs take a while to get done with them, but they are certainly fixers. Instead of fixing the ship, however, the thing that they fix the best is the wire management inside the wire management inside this human is a mess. Rip it out, 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 rip. Mantis are excellent crew members for readjusting the guts of any unwanted boarders on both your ship and theirs. There are 2 different kinds of mantis, the free mantis and the hive. I would not want to live with either of them. The hive will be the second to discuss because it's easier. They want to kill you, or make you their slave, and then kill you after. For the free mantis, there's a few weeds that need pruning, such as the fact that they're complete fucking morons and they always end up in trouble for it. Even going as far as to go around murdering a bunch of people because they don't know any better. Sex is another matter entirely, which can be discussed as such. I am not interested in procreation without due cause, or, put in another term, I think consent is very important, and I do not trust slavers or those without a full understanding of the intimacy of sex to respect and properly give consent. This does not mean it is all bad, however. Explicitly because they are the space variants of Chads, they also come with some unique benefits if you succeed in befriending one of these space Mongolians. In the best use of the term as well, given that they are uniquely qualified to communicate with each other, and having one with you is a great sign of trust among the Mantis. Having a free Mantis with you in a free Mantis sector is one of the easiest ways to pass through any sector with little to no incident. And usually if you do end up in a fight, the free Mantis will be there to help you in any way they can muster. And they do mean in any way possible. They'll join your crew, give you all their storage. They'll even divert critical resources and weapons to aid your cause. In short, I am a big fan of the free Mantis because they're just chill dudes when you gain one of their trust, and it does feel quite nice to have one on the team. I don't like gambling with my life, so I'm not gonna stick it in there. Now, the Hive I am significantly less of a fan of. They're all fuckers, basically. Mostly slavers or pirates or just fighters in general. Most of them are just there to have a good time, and a good time for them is just killing shit. The way I would justify not nuking them from orbit is as follows. Do you want to find the One Piece? These guys are literally on a journey for the One Piece. Their ethos is very much the strong will thrive, the weak will die. I can't in good faith remove the bugs from existence, but I am tempted, believe me. Aside from this, there are indeed mantises with free will, and a fair few of them in the Hive can even be considered friendly. They're not a huge fan of races that tell them how to live, but they are slavers, so not a whole lot of people are huge fans of the Mantis to begin with. If you do find a friendly Mantis, however, you are in luck. Hive Mantis are significantly more suited to longer fights than their free Mantis brethren, and they also usually come with package deals. So you can bet that having a Hive Mantis on the team is a solid investment. Just, whatever you do, don't try to have sex with one. The Rockman. This is gonna be a spoiler for the entire section, but we've hit the peak of racism. Look, I wouldn't want to live there. I wouldn't even come close. They're so racist they'll send off distress signals when they're genuinely in danger, and yet use their meager resources to attempt to kill any non-Rockmen that try to help them. Reasoning with the Rockmen typically results in less than satisfactory results, given their incredibly racist nature. It's so bad that even if you have a Rockman crew with you, they'll dismiss them as traitors to the Rock kind and immediately begin combat with you. They're so bad, in fact, that genocide is an action that is looked positively upon by other races. Imagine that, these Rockmen managed to get, on average, hated by the rest of the galaxy so much that aiding in their arrest, killing them, and even enslaving them is seen positively by the other governments. The Rockman foreign policy is just arresting and killing anyone that enters their space, so for one, I support it. The theocracy can burn for all I care. This is an easy decision for the theocracy. I wouldn't love them, I sure as shit wouldn't want to fuck a rock, and it's pretty easy for me to imagine tossing a rock into a river. Now, you have to imagine, for a government so hated, their version of a terrorist is pretty hard to deal with. Yeah. The Lost Sun have almost no subtlety in their rank. From their design, to their main weapons being cooked and crew alive, to their policy. Yeah, these guys are literally just space Nazis. Their color theme is even red and black, I'm sorry, it is what it is. They even managed to outcompete the space Nazis inside of the game that explicitly labels a different race as the space Nazis. And I'm sure I will have to edit this in post, so if I do, it is a certain very important part of German history that I'm referencing. Let me paint you a race. You're an incredibly intelligent race that hails from a heavily contested planet. You mostly stayed on the surface while your cousin, the slugs, mostly stayed in the water. Now you would be a very peaceful race, generally science-focused as one is, because other than that, what does a world power do? So you build a science-focused race and they begin to expand. Ethically, you create numerous innovations and eventually become a spacefaring race. What would the slug do? As previously discussed, the slugs are shitters, so they probably stole your FTL blueprints, became their own spacefaring race, and came to heads with you. The shells, which are the race we are discussing, were forced to leave their own planet by the slug shitters and found their own sectors, which they turned into scientific powerhouses. The rebels, afraid of a scientifically superior foe who had things like ethics, proceeded to make it their life's work to make the shell's life living hell. The Mantis, seeing an opportunity for trophies, hunted them down in their new sectors. Like holy shit, man, they don't got a break. The fucking Klansmen. Here's a lore drop for you. The Klansman's armor is made out of the shells of the shell. Which means that a Klansman, bare minimum, needs to hunt down a shell ship, harvest the shells, kill them, and use their armor. Will turn their shells into armor. Holy fuck, it's terrible. I would absolutely live there, but that's for two reasons. One, I like science. Typically, my favorite topics for general discussion are things like how cane toads suck or why two rats are very important for the forest ecosystem. 2. I ain't a bitch, and it feeds upon the typical male fantasy to use highly advanced technology to hold off or slay a bunch of opposing forces for the good of your own kind. Now, there's a very hard question here that needs to be asked, and to answer it, let me point out the fact that this highly scientifically advanced civilization has solved countless medical problems and is actively working on ways to make life easier on many fronts. Does this change the fact that it would be, in fact, difficult to fuck what is essentially a giant snail? No, but doesn't mean that they would find a way to make it possible. Then yeah, probably. So there, yeah, I'd probably fuck one. I believe that they would find a solution to my very niche and inconsequential problem because they are ethically bound to do so, or because I make one horny. And I wouldn't genocide them because obviously if I have this much of a positive opinion on them as a whole, I think in general it's hard to justify genocide. That on top of it not being very easy to kill somebody that can defend itself, they're a highly technologically advanced race, so that's also not gonna work out, and there's a reason why the shell still exists despite almost everything around it trying to kill them. Being a completely isolated parent race in a hyper-competitive galaxy that has gone much farther than catching up to your ships and designs has to be one of the experiences of all time. I do not envy the Crystal, but I do want their guns. As one of the most isolated races, there's little to say and even littler to do with them, so I'll make it brief and just talk about what I can. The Crystal have an entire ethos around them. Fuck these bitches in my lawn. Their problem is more about numbers and the logistical issue of war, so they don't fight an outright war with the Theocracy or Lost Sons. Instead, they're using an entire division called the Sister Species Liberation Group to try and regain a foothold instead. They don't like either rock race because the outcasts are the only ones they try and liberate, so they don't like the Lost Sons and they don't like the Theocracy. Notably, outcasts are not part of a cult, so they can't be a part of either. Let me keep it brief. I wouldn't want to live around them because they're so xenophobic. And I don't want to shove rocks in my pee hole, so that's out the window as well. Yes, kidney stones count, and no, I don't like the feeling of those crystals coming out either. So, now, genocide. Is it ethical to kill a race that is basically learning how the world works? No. But is it practical? No. They have really good tech, honestly. Their guns are pretty solid. But is it fun? It's fun. Yeah, it's fun. The crystals are mostly pricks, and they're very rock-like. I hate the rocks. In short, I probably wouldn't genocide the crystal, but I mean, that's because it's really inconvenient to nuke all the rocks in the world, you know? It's like, unless there's like a very conveniently nuke the universe button placed between my legs that barks until I use it, I don't think it's really practical to remove every rock in existence. That's a lot of rocks, that's a lot of crystals. Actually, magma is just a liquid form of crystals if you really think about it, because the process of crystallization is what forms rocks. Rocks are just made out of a bunch of crystals if you take the analogy that far. Alright, China. Just hold up, just stay with me. Just imagine this, okay? What if China actually did fall before putting up the wall? Alright? That's what happened to the Spectral Dynasty. They were strong once upon a time, but now the not actually undead remains of their civilization are here to fuck up just about any living thing, and non-living thing as well. Huge points to the Spectral Dynasty for taking one look at AI and deciding that it's whack, considering how much it profiles people in-game, as well as all the mistakes it makes before vaporizing more children than America does in a minute. I'd say the AI hate is pretty justified. Now, I'm not sticking my pipe near a ball of hot electric or a combusting, like whatever the heck is they're made of. They're straight up murder hot air. I'm not gonna put my penis in there. Spectral Dynasty can be separated into two parts. The part that is proud to be a part of the Spectral Dynasty, and the part that are refugees of running away from the Spectral Dynasty. It's just Space China if the Space Chinese were asexual reproducing clouds of gas. Here's a fun question. How does genocide work for them? They're ghosts. Are they even alive? Is this even viable? Time to move on. First, no, would not. Second, no. Third, they're literally made of metal. I can't even do the trick where I install Linux and a flashlight on them because they would just eat both, and I cannot guarantee that they wouldn't just vomit it up. I do like the Lanius, personally. They're a race of people who have a loose idea of government and really don't have any sort of guiding principle. Other than a hunger for scrap, you really don't know what you're getting from them, and while some group of Lanians have formed relations with factions, others are perfectly content with eating just any kind of metal they run into. And honestly, it's hard to impose morale on a group of things that are just here to have a good time eating scrap. They have the unique quality of sucking all the air out of any room they're in, like not just oxygen, but they've deprived the room of the fluid known as air. And it's important to note, as having any relation with a Lanius is considered a risk. As we have progressively gotten worse and worse with these races, I have come upon the most disgusting of them all. Massive, sentient leeches. Fuck no. But, look, I'm gonna do it alright, but these leeches are literally the size of a person. I don't get the boar fetish, I don't got self-hate issues, I'm really not a big fan of losing all my blood to something that doesn't even get me off. I have a fleshlight, as previously noted. But like, that covers my penis, that doesn't cover me. Like, these leeches would eat, like, the whole me. The leech policy is pretty antithetical to humans, owing to the fact that we're more of a convenient food source and fuel to the leeches, and I can't exactly put my finger on it, but, something tells me I'm not gonna be living La Vida Loca there, so that's gonna be a pass for me. I've already discussed sex because physically, the idea of a leech being that big repulses me, so, no. Mark that one there, too. I guess it comes down to the final question. Like, yes, the leech genocide would be bad. However, without taking out all the leeches, they would destroy your ship, your warp drive, and as the name suggests, they would suck you dry. They would come out with a host of issues when it comes to clearing them out, reasoning with them, or otherwise containing them. Genocide is the safest, most effective, and ethically sound option. It's sure as shit better than starving them to death, and it's more effective than containing them all in the extra long creepy sock containment chambers that are always ripe for the abuse of powers. Nuke them from orbit, fire every laser cannon we have, annihilate their species, spike our own blood with poison. I really don't care what mess we use. Like, how hard is it? Like, look, I got them pretty nasty phobias. Leeches and parasites just fit into that general niche. I need these fuckers gone. I hate who the fuck in the multiverse this team decided. Who the fuck on the multiverse team decided, you know what's missing from this roster of all these diverse types of aliens and bugs that are all beautiful in their own right? Fucking leeches! Which one of you fucking bastards? Which curly cunt decided to hurt me on a level so personal that when I saw one, I paused the game? Anyways, in short, the leech race isn't actually all that bad. A lot of them are somewhat friendly faces. They form a faction they call the Republic, and it's honestly one of the most Soviet Union things in the game. This includes all the politics, backstabbing, and typical Soviet behavior. Honestly, they ain't so bad, despite my previous outbursts, but fuel is a huge part of the game. Every ship, every sector, every single spacefaring race needs a sufficient supply of fuel. And we are not talking about gasoline, we're talking about the natural resource that can only be found inside of asteroids. If you're able to harness these resources, you would be an incredibly powerful player in the galactic race. Indeed, so powerful, you would need to be your own faction, capable of handling other governments. Zolkafar Industries is that faction. Zolkafar is Quifar? Zolkafar. I don't count the other corporations as something separate because most of the time they are firmly aligned with a singular faction, with the exception of the Hectars. For example, Tony's is an offshoot of the Irgon Republic, Hephaestus Shipyards literally gives the rebellion their ships, and Wentworth. Fuck Wentworth. In contrast to all these factions, Zolkafar is a relatively independent faction made of multiple races that I can't really consider fucking because there's always some random bullshit like leeches. But they stand on their own as a government consisting of these many factions that have to be considered their own. And that's because I live there. A mining colony is a pretty solid place to live in a spacefaring world. You and your entire workplace are basically safe from all but the most extreme of politics, and you can usually bargain with other races for protection in return for some more favorable prices or even deals regarding your fuel. Basically, you have a lot of chips to bring to the bargaining table, and you live a relatively nice life with a goal in mind each day and a hefty fucking paycheck. Now, would I nuke these people from No, I want their fuel. I want their fuel. Yeah, but honestly, if nuking a couple of ships helps with that, maybe I do like nuke a couple of people. Usually it doesn't come to it. They are a corporation. Contracts are a lot easier than that. These fucks were saved for the very end because they're the most common faction. You see these guys everywhere. They're inescapable. They colonized every place in the galaxy and many others. Hell, even the multiverse isn't immune to them. Of course, I'm talking about humans. Oh yeah, the colonizers. Real quick, I gotta get my bias out of the way. I am human, right? So that's gonna make living with humans much easier. And because I am a human, I think humans are hot, generally speaking. I know, hot take, especially given my roster of game. Most people would see that I finished Epic Battle Fantasy and assume that I'm incredibly red-pilled or that I fuck men. I took the third untrodden path and fucked myself over instead. Anyways, living there. I'm gonna go on a limb and say that all the rebels are not 100% bad. They're mostly undesirable, however, we need to get into the weeds of what their politics are and how they implement their policies to come to a conclusion based on merit and history. The rebellion was formed when one guy, we'll just call him John Helldiver. John was a man of great fame and fortune, as well as an insatiable hate for aliens and a great lust for power. So engulfed for his hate for Xenoseed was he. that he decided to cast off his racism and use all of his white privilege to use all politically questionable decisions from the ruling government to go for a huge power grab. A coup, one could say. With his wealth, he amassed the requisite amount of AI, and ships required from fellow human supremacists to make a huge fleet. To take over so many sectors, they started to become their own faction and take over entirely. After the results of the base game, the Fed survived because the first captain puts John Helldiver's bum ass in the ground and the rebels are routed. His desire for racist tendencies burned so bright that they survive an annihilation of their faction, find a way to build the multiverse drives, and spend the rest of their natural and unnatural lifespan going through multiverses trying to spread the American dream of the Israeli law to these unknown worlds. Now, hear me out. I'm not an incel, but imagine it from a different perspective. You're living in 2026. Blatantly, people who do not fit the predetermined conditions set by the government are being systematically removed or killed, one at a time. Despite this, you're living relatively normally because you do fit these conditions. The economy is getting worse, medical supplies are becoming harder to come by, and the amount of time you have for yourself is slipping away, slowly but surely. Could you really blame someone for living in these conditions? The system uses you by putting you in a constant state of stress. You cannot rest because you're too tired to rest because you're constantly fighting even at home. Deadlines and bills are most of what's on your mind. You distract yourself from the pain of living by finding escapisms and culture entertainment. Living with the rebels would be similar. They're systematically eliminating the different alien races, building a society for only the humans that fit their ideology. They kill anyone who has any sentiment of alien sympathy, and they drive you to work until your meat comes off the bone. Now, I wouldn't want to live here. State oppression is built on systems. Much like the aliens, the people who are on the chopping block when the people in power decide they need a new scapegoat are up next. I do not stand with the aliens because I will be next. I stand with them because they were first. Despite this, having sex with a rebel is not objectively incorrect. This is because, as aforementioned, living in a rebel sector is not a blatant endorsement of their policies or actions. Many people live in places where they would not agree with the government because they cannot leave or because they would rather live there than return to a home that is not home for them. This is due to many reasons, socioeconomically. I also think that humans are probably harder than half the cast, so yeah. Also, speaking of, since a lot of these people are not for or against the rebellion, but rather a label for their circumstance, I can't justify nuking them. I would love to go around, nuking sectors, but alas. The ethical consequences would eat away at my soul, as the guilt churns in my heart like the fire of a nuclear blast churns away at the skull of a newborn baby. Alright, I've avoided the topic long enough. The faction you play as, the thing that could be somehow worse than modern day America, is a government that could actually function. The feds are as they sound, they're the fucking feds. You're basically an Uber cop, a renegade that can do whatever they want in the name of ensuring the survival of the Federation for that universe. Given that it is your faction, you can probably imagine that they're set up to be the good guys in the war, and that's pretty much true. You got video game stereotype number 9119132, which is that the main protagonist faction is full of good guys and a few bad apples. I mean, where exactly does the rebellion come from? They don't exactly come from the outside. That being said, we're not here to hyperanalyze the feds. You can do that yourself by playing the game, base or not. They're so standard that not knowing how the feds work is tantamount to heresy. The obvious answer is that I live here, but first let me explain why. Because I'm a fucking chud. I like access to the internet, I like food, I like living, I like a house over my head, I'd fuck a human. And look, it's pretty easy to say that I'd drop a nuke in like the Atlantic or something, but it gets a lot harder for me to say with a straight face, yeah, let's nuke Detroit when faced with the mounting cost of defeating systems in place to stop that from happening. That's all the races without much spoilers, or any at all. There's a few more races and factions that exist in the game, each with their own policies and whatnot, but consider the following. It's more fun to find it out by yourself, and I also haven't found it myself. Actually, that's a lie. I'm capable of doing that, it's my video. I found these guys, or more accurately their ship, after my computer quite literally exploded. That may have delayed the production of this video by a few months, but trust me, I will make another video, faster. Next time. The Saltmen are but singular, their sector annihilated by the same things that happened to the Crystals and the Vagabond, but much more completely. The Salt that we encounter is pretty open-minded, but very welcoming to different species, and just wants to find more of itself to fuck. I live with the Saltmen, let's break that out. They're just made of salt, but other than that, they are man. They probably dehumidify the air, so that's a plus because humid air in the summer sucks balls, and humid air in like negative 40 degrees Celsius is a literal health hazard. Now we have a problem, which is the following. I cannot fuck rocks. This, along with my current dislike of shooting rocks out of my urethra like 9mm, means that, despite really liking the Saltman demeanor, I will not be committing with one. Genocide is on the table, however. It's pretty easy to just kill one guy. The question lies in why I'm killing the one guy. Genocide in this instance would be a matter of murder, and there'd be one circumstance where I find this applicable. Say I am in a Master Chef competition, and the saltman would be my key ingredient in the dish. Let's consider our options. We have the humans, which I wouldn't consider for the dish, as the more rich and porky flavoring would be unwise to add for the richness. The NG wouldn't do anything, so we can discount them. The Zoltan are made of hard light, which would make the dish glow, but otherwise they are useless. The Mantis would be useful for making certain dishes involving insect parts, but I would depart from them to make a dish I actually want. The Slug is the main event in the dish, which means I would also be including the shell as a potential part of this dish. Escargot is a dish that comprises mainly of snail, full of all sorts of herbs, spices, salts, and anything that the chef could bullshit as going along well with snail, so long as it tasted alright. I will be entering a non-aggression pack of the French, as my hatred for the snail greatly outweighs my contempt for the French-Canadian. This pack will last until Alberta gets its shit together and stops trying to segregate from Canada in increasingly more hamster-like ways. Anyways, back to the point. Escargot requires salt in many cases for both the preparation phase and the cooking phase of the dish, as a way to clean the snail, remove the impurities, reduce the slime trail to a minimum, and finally to make sure that what you're eating is safe. In this way, the slugs, shell, and saltman are all synergistic in my stomach. To further the tummy agenda, we can add orchids as a way to bring some lightness to the dish. Putting in a consistency similar to kelp or spinach and bringing a way to reduce all the salt we have likely added to the dish from needing so much to clean the flesh and those disgusting slugs. This is the scenario where I would in fact kill the only remaining saltman on Earth. Think about all the things I'd be able to buy with the scrap attained from winning the universe's best chef. Maybe the salt ship. It's pretty good. That ship is disgusting. So, remember when I made the Mori joke earlier? Yeah, this is why. Equinoids only have like half a place in the galaxy and most of that is outside the clan's front door, so I'll be brief. I wouldn't fuck them because I already bought them out on El Noct, so like even a soft, medium-sized Seraphian of the Pegasus would not be fitting inside my boy box. For now. I would live with them, because despite being sentient, they're incredibly peaceful and horse/pony-like, so yeah, just kinda live with them. We live with Umas in this world. And since I'm a resident enjoyer of living things, I wouldn't nuke them. Moving on. Predators. Alright, hear me out. As natural predators to some of the most numerous insects on Earth, they are very effective at limiting the spread of many pests that would cause a lot of issues if left unchecked. Now this implies they don't become an invasive pest. Whoops. These, GAS, gas as they are called, are an homage to Alien, which means that if you secure their future, they will be very friendly to you. However, the spiders will kill you. They will kill anyone. They are invasive and able to pilot ships. They have a whole sector taken over at this point, so let's just get this out of the way. Fuck them. No, like, not like that. Fuck, I don't wanna stick, yeah. Anyways. Slime, the typical low-level fodder enemy used to introduce a poor adventurer to what kind of genre their dungeon-delving game is. Turned into a mid-game monster, with ships that are impossible to board and weapons that threaten to kill your crew faster than the whole of your ship expires. To me, this means a very valuable ally that can be used to unleash havoc on the enemy team by turning them into salt and committing what can only be described as an act of war. This also means I have another fledgling race to rate that have no control over the sector they live in and are an invasive species within that sector, which means I also have 2 nickels. I wonder if I'll be able to trade this in for a small razor, if I come to. Elephant out of the room, living with blobs that can become whatever I want them to be, it's pretty easy. Everyone would love a Ditto for all of its legitimate and illicit purposes, but take a second to consider the implications of such a decision. The slime are a very new species, their communication with other races is difficult, which can heavily impede your ability to live with them. They have no sense of social interaction, and they are so new that they are probably unknown in other sectors. They may not be welcome, or they may even be hunted down in them, and other races would come to take what they believe is theirs, including the slavers in the clan. Look, I'm not saying I wouldn't live with them, because I said earlier that I would, and I stick by that, but what I am saying is that there are conditions that are very harsh here, and considering how far along the other spacefaring races are, that can become an issue. Now sex. Self-cess is on the menu, so this is a yes. Genocide is going to be a no. The implication here is that the fledgling race is valuable to many different races for many other reasons. Whether it is to be sold to slavery, to luxury buyers, or to be mercenaries, these blobs are a sentient race who deserve to try and carve a life out in this cold expanse of space they call home. It is my belief that you should never kill something simply for existing. The problem that I have with these blobs is that aside from existing, they don't really do anything else, so while I cannot say genocide is the premier option of dealing with these blobs right now, depending on how their society develops, they may become the chef's choice. Alright, so that's the determination out of the way. It's only gonna get scarier from here. Like, you're already living the life of the average crewmate, but if you live in the West, holy shit. Anyways, I'm gonna yap a bit more about the ships and systems before I lose myself abroad. You start the game with a huge amount of info to read through on your first time over, I highly suggest it. A lot of gaps between the base game and the multiverse are explained, and the game won't baby you, so you will be heavily encouraged to interact with the mechanics explained at the beginning. You can also brush up anytime you start up a new run, which is a nice touch. A lot of the upgrades specifically in the box are pretty solid. In specific, this is where you find the scrap arm upgrade. I highly suggest getting it within the first 2 sectors. You all know why. Do you like only seeing one piece of equipment ever? This is the mod for you. There is such an abundance of unique gear that for a lot of items, you only ever see them once a week at best. This is praised because it makes a lot of runs more memorable. The lab upgrades are very situational, but occasionally there are some unit upgrades that are considered mandatory. A lot of the upgrades added by Multiverse are actually basic game ship augments that can be added to your ship innately, either by paying the upgrade cost or by finding it in the wild and using a unique prompt. This can be quite useful, because many of these effects are describable as nice, but not worthy of eating up one of those 3 precious ship augment slots. Alright, we've gone over all the important bits, let me show you some of the fun shit. First off, my favorite ship so far. I really like crew killing. As previously mentioned, as briefly as it was, there are typically 2 ways to win in a combat encounter. The first is that you destroy the enemy ship by reducing their hold zero, the basic mouth-breathing gamer mechanic. The second, more enlightened way, is to kill the enemy crew, removing their ability to respawn by destroying their clone bay, and then whatever bullshit the game tells you to do later. Within the crew killing genre, the Multiverse mod really lets you choose between your preferred gender of manslaughter, of which I'll quickly give a non-inclusive list here. Laser gun, stab, burn, no air, radiation poisoning, getting hit by one of the ship's big guns, robot in your ship, eaten alive, exploded, and much more. With this in mind, allow me to show you the Baby Immolator 9000. I've censored the actual name because it's a spoiler, so you'll just have to live with the Baby Immolator 9000. It comes packaged with 3 of the best pit bulls in the entire galaxy, and a Baby Immolator. Let me explain! If a ship has shields, they are initially immune to the Baby Immolator. You need to puncture through that smooth fungusi in order to access the Urshifu underneath. Or in short terms, you're cooking. Now in the Galactic Kitchen, you gotta have your ingredients well done, to ensure that you are not poisoned randomly by the myriad of things that can happen to you if you eat an alien raw. Cracking open the shell using your crystal gun is an excellent way to disable systems like their shields, weapons, and engines. From there, you can set those places on fire using your flam bridge to prevent the enemy from recovering while preheating your oven. As the fire spreads, focus on critical life support systems, and then let the oven cook the ingredients to perfection. In terms of support for this kind of playstyle, we got the single most brutal weapon I can think of, possibly an add-on, which you will probably add to the mod as it comes pre-built with it. Let me paint you a weapon. Just imagine you're an ion designer, and you really like the ability to go through shields, but your boss slapped your ass and called you their little insult for trying to make an ion not do its main job, shield removal. Heavily embarrassed by your upper management's propensity to strip you as punishment, you focus on a blast that could do both, and you come to a realization. Using your newfound insight, you produce an orb that can puncture through the shield of a ship, while also hitting the system underneath that the ion was aimed at. Your superior gets flooded with offers from multiple factions. Your weapons idea is a huge hit. The phaser is in early production, and you're in a meeting when someone says something so profound that they almost get put in the airlock. So John Phaser, your product is obviously an insane hit. Many of the ships in the sector are already using this tech to great effect. I was wondering, if it can puncture shields, can it also puncture holes? This single idea is the weapon that I want to bring up today. The Asphyxion is probably my favorite weapon in the game. It is, quite simply, the system disabler. If there's any targetable part of the enemy ship that is giving you trouble, one shot with this thing, and that system is bare minimum going to be ion. But this thing is called the Asphyxion. This weapon puts Marie-sized holes inside of the enemy ship, and the resulting hull breach makes the system difficult to enter or repair for most of the units in the game. Literally pair this with anything, the moment that system takes a lick of damage, the enemy ship begins a failure cascade that will eventually lead to a crew kill. Do you like mechanics? Well, I do too. Explicitly the one where, if I put an orchid on my ship, turn off my oxygen, and make sure that the only crew I have on board can either survive without oxygen, or are constantly around a plant, I have complete control over boarding. And with a teleporter, I can have control over their ship too. Do you like money? Well, I like money. Nebulae are now an amazing way to get money, so long as you learn the keywords. Typically, if you run into a bunch of asteroids, it's a perfect time to get money. Also, for scrap fiends, related to this, at the start of a run, quickly press on this box, hit this line of dialogue, and try to install an arm. Of course, we're going for scrap collector, and with 50 scrap, you'll get 10% on all money in the game. Compounding this, getting rich is as easy as one nebulae sector with a bunch of rocks in it, or you can just kill rebels, that works too. Alright, random intermission, the game fucking crashed. Uh, I hit the one to interact with something, and let me see if I can. Well, let me see if we can get a window capture going for the specific window I'm looking for. This came up, so what the fuck? Why the fuck am I getting broken scripted? Why am I getting broken scripted in my funny ship game? Why am I getting Wonderland.jarred? Why am I getting Moonjarred? What? What the fuck? Why? Why? What is like so? I don't get it. I don't. I actually like. I. So when I was playing through this, I was actually looking at my phone, and then I saw like the glitch, and I was like, oh shit, my PC's broken again because I have this old rickety piece of shit from. It's a state-of-the-art PC from like five. No, wait, it would have been 8 years ago at this point. So yeah, I got this old rickety piece of shit, right? And that happens, and I'm sitting there like, what? Did I break something? No. As it turns out, I guess this was scripted, but I was literally on the phone, like about to text the fucking girl that recommended me a multiverse in the first place, and all she sends me is it's the fucking wiki face, and I want to kill her. I'm gonna fucking kill her. I'm not actually gonna kill her. If anything, I'd kiss her. Anyways. Okay. Well, I just got back into the game, and the ship is gone. The Oracle. What the fuck? What Oracle? Tell me what's going on, you fucking piece of shit!